All right, let's pray together. God, we do thank you for these moments when we slow down and when we think about you and your love, when we think about how we can love each other more. And we pray that you be with us as we talk together and then as we worship in a few minutes. We give you thanks. Amen. Okay, so today in worship we're going to be talking about Romans 14, 1 through 12. And we've been in Romans, and I told you that the first chapter of Romans are very different from the later chapters because Paul seems to be giving instructions, and he is. He doesn't just seem to be, he is. So he talks about the church and what's going on, and today he's talking to the church in Rome. And now, when we visualize church, we think a building and a congregation, but these were probably house churches. And so they would get a group together, and, like Barb and Deb might have some people come to their house, John might have some people come to his house, and Mary might have, but they were all the church in Rome. Yeah.
This was before the Romans became Christian?
No, there were already Romans that were Christians. Okay. Yeah,
but not the whole.
Right. No, but there were pockets of Christianity, and what is happening in the church is that people are coming and they're bringing their religious practices from before. And so they're bringing them to the church. And so I have my religious practices, and Deb has her religious practices, and I think mine are right, and you think yours are right. And so what's happened is they've become very judgmental of each other. Well, I'm right, and she's wrong. And so you know what that does in a group. It causes great discord. And so this passage says, welcome the person weak in the faith, but not in order to argue about differences of opinion. And then he talks about some people believe that you can eat everything. Now, this is not about being a vegetarian and that kind of stuff. It's about, we know there were laws about, rules about what you could eat and what you couldn't eat. And some people think it's fine, eat what you want. And so they're arguing about this. And some think one day is sacred and that's the way you honor God, and then others think it's not sacred. So this is going on, and then he says, but why do you judge your brother or sister, or why do you look down on your brother or sister? We all will stand in front of the judgment seat of God. And so I think what he's trying to tell us is we're all the same. We're all part of the same family. And so the more we get along, the more we are acting like the family of Christ. We can get along in spite of our differences. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about conflict, judgment, and one of the things I was thinking about, I want you to be thinking about a time in your life when you were part of some conflict, or you felt judged by somebody, or you were in a situation where there was a lot of that going on. We've all been in situations where there's been that kind of thing. And one of the things I was going to say is I have married quite a few couples, and I have done premarital counseling. I'm not a licensed counselor, but I will meet with couples or individuals for a few times to talk, and then if they need more, they need to find a license. I'll help them find a licensed counselor. Well, anyway, but one of the things that I notice is, and you've probably seen this too, that when two people get going at each other, and it can happen in a marriage, it can happen in a family, it can happen anywhere, in an office, when they start going at each other and they dig in their heels that they're right, it's a very short distance to reconciliation. If one person said, I don't want us to fight like this. Let's talk. Let's sit down and see if we can work this out. And had an open mind, it would take that long, and they would have reconciliation. I'm not saying all the problems would be worked out, but they built a wall, and it's like, I'm just not going to talk to that person. I just can't talk to them. We're just too different. if one person would take that little step, it could be all different. And I watch that in couples, I watch it in friends, in the church, because usually we're not that far away, you know, it's just how we perceive things, and I perceive it a certain way, and you perceive it different, and I think I'm right, and you think you're right, and so I realized, my son-in-law actually said this one day, but I realized that I often tell something, and I say, it's the truth. Well, I think it's the truth, but you may think yours is the truth, right? And so it's coming to that awareness that I don't have the truth wrapped up in a little, you know, I wish I did, but I don't. And so it's just amazing to me how people can get, how we can get so crossways with each other. And when it gets down to it, it's not a big thing. It's something not big. But what Paul is saying is, if that means something to them, let them. If they don't want to eat fish on Friday, I mean, they want to eat fish on Friday, is that hurting you? Let them do it. And so I think he's saying that being tolerant of each other, being more loving and compassionate. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in the sermon is this article. I subscribe to Atlantic Magazine, and this week it came, and it was an article by David Brooks, who is a reporter for the New York Times. And the title is, How Did America Become So Mean? I think that just kind of socks you in the gut, you know, and it's true. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit and what he says about it. So you talk to me. Have you seen this happen between two people? Maybe you weren't one of the two people, or have you experienced it, or have you seen it in the church? I'm going to tell you, I've been in the church since I was in the cradle roll, and I've seen it, conflict in the church. That's why we have so many churches, right? That's what I used to say about Baptist churches, you know, that's because you get mad and you go start your own church, right? Uh-huh.
So I have one. Like,
Okay.
when I, you know, growing up in high school, we had the jocks, we had the freaks, the, you know, RC people, and anytime we were at a church, you still had that same groups. You could see them. Like,
Yeah.
And I always felt outed by that, just because I couldn't be a jock. You know, I was just a freak. I was a,
Yeah.
you know, pothead, whatever you want to call me. And I know that there was that division, even then.
Yeah.
And that was when I was 16.
Right.
And I remember telling my testimony about that in front of the youth group. And I mentioned how divided the youth group was just within the church, you know, in a choir.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even all the way down to that little micro subgroup of the church to a choir. Even choir, there was division, you know. And you know, you want to go be a jock, go be a jock. If I want to go do that, go do that. You know, I mean, there's got to be a line somewhere that you can't cross, because you don't want to offend the other people, so you have to. There's some give and take there.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And it when you're that age, it's a matter of, I want to feel that I belong somewhere, so I'm having a group.
Right.
We belong, but you're not. You don't belong. You know, and it's kind of about us and them. That book I've been reading to you from about the priest that does the ministry with kids that have been in gangs, and he talks about, you know, because gangs, a lot of what a gang does is create belonging. I want to belong in this gang. They have accepted me, and I belong, and I've got the tattoos to prove it. And so when they finally realize that's not the kind of belonging they want, and they go to, say, Homeboy Industries, and they get their tattoos taken off, and you know, they realize there's a life beyond that. There's a life that's different from that, and that, you know, you don't have to shoot people that don't agree with you. You don't have to, beat up people that don't agree with you, that they can live. And he tells one story in there that's really good about two guys that came to Humboydt, and they were from different gangs, rival gangs, and how they had to work to put that behind them, what they thought about the other gang, and put it behind them and move forward with their new life. And so we're not much different from that. And I told you, I talk about it way too much, but how much I love Ted Lasso. And actually, he talks about it in this, I think, article. Did he talk about Ted Lasso? I read about it in some article. And, but I think that's what he was doing, is trying to create a team where people felt that they belonged. This is the team, and no matter how well you play or what you do last week on the field, you belong. You're a part of this group. You belong. All right, somebody else. That's a good example, Tim. Somebody else. Now, don't tell me you've never been around conflict or judgmental people.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Well, so my brother's a retired minister of music, Southern Baptist. My sister-in-law's a pianist. And so last year, they got this brilliant idea that they were going to drive to Nebraska. They talked to my nephew, and he'd just gotten a new puppy. And my brother decided he was going to volunteer to keep it down here and do a little training. I don't know where that came from.
Training on the dog?
On the dog,
Can you
yeah.
all hear?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, training on the dog. And so, and of course, dogs are supposed to live in the house,
Right.
okay? And so this baby has been used to living in the house, can be on the furniture, all this. And so when they got to Greenville, the baby went outside. And I learned about it, and I got on my text, and I don't know, through the course of a few days of going back and forth, I think I texted to my sister-in-law, have y'all lost your minds? Because the dog had been used to being coddled and stuff, which is the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Because I'm right.
Because you're right. Because that's what you do.
That's what I do.
That's right.
And so anyway, and actually, and it was not a small baby. I mean, it had gotten some size, and it was a lab, but it was young.
Yeah.
So I'll say it's young. And so anyway, after a few days of batting back and forth, have you lost your minds? And then I was doing some back texting to my nephew and his wife, that's where the dog belonged, and they had no idea. And I thought, well, somebody needs to come down here and get her. And then one night I just thought, well, I need to just shut up, because it was really escalating. And so I shut up. She knows. So because I had to bat it back and forth with her too, and so I finally just shut up about it. And it wasn't too long before they drove down and got her. I feel like I had a hand in that. And but so anyway, but I was wrong, and I know that I'm right about dogs need to be inside.
Right.
But I was wrong how I didn't want to have a conversation, because they didn't have anything to say that I would agree with.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just gotta shut up.
Yeah.
And that's probably the hardest thing I ever do.
Well,
just shut
and you
up.
bring up a really good point. It starts as a little thing. But if you hadn't realized that, y'all could be estranged. You're
Yeah.
never going to talk to your brother again.
Mhm.
I mean, that happens in families, right? It happens in churches. And we just are going to leave. We're going to take our toys and go to another church or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so,
And they sent me a picture thinking this was cute. They were sitting in the living room, and in the backyard there's the window, and she was up looking in the window, and they sent me a picture of it thinking it was cute. Well,
what's it cute to you?
boom, that's so anyway. So after a few days I just shut up.
Yeah. Well, they had 3 boys, right? So would they have put one, because to you, your pets are your children.
Correct.
To them.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Well, no, would they have put their kid out there and said, oh, you're so cute out in the backyard?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But they don't get that.
No.
Because they had these 3 children, and it's like, well, we couldn't keep all those pets in the house. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's all in how we look at it and how we see it from our perspective. And I think that's a really good point. And that's what I'm saying too, is I've seen couples and it starts about like that. And then in a minute, they're getting a divorce. And it's like, what? I mean, you know, and it's just takes off. And so it's out of control. And I think that's exactly what Paul is saying. Don't let this get out of control. This is not a live or die kind of thing. Don't let it get out of control. Let's keep it, you know, so that you can be the family of Christ, that you can minister together, that you can live together and work together in love. So, I mean, do we think that when we go into worship on Sunday that everybody in that room agrees with us? I hate to tell you. You know, I've had people that will say, well, of course we don't have any Republican celebration. And I said, oh, yeah, we do. Trust me. We do. We have people with differing opinions. Tim?
So this just came to me because thinking, I'm, you know, I have physics background, mechanical background, thinking about some of the studies that I did and how, like, gravity, you know, the first people who thought about gravity, they looked at the Earth and they saw an apple drop. That's all they saw, right? And then smarter people came and they got their brains open a little bit more and they started looking at it from a relative point. And instead of saying this, we're stuck here, this is everything, we're tied to those, they started looking at it from a different point, like a universe. And now it's totally different because now you got quantum physics, you got you know all these new things, string theory. It's because they've kept looking at it from a different perspective, and that should be our guide, like our template. Is that if we can look at it from a different perspective and then grow, because that's what we do physically. That's what's happened physically in our Earth.
Right.
I mean, that's how we got all this stuff. We got cars. Of course, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know?
Right.
So it just depends on how, which way it goes.
True. And the truth is, there's probably some good about it, and there's probably some bad about it, right? There's some things that we wish didn't happen, but there's a lot that's good. But the other thing is, and I hate to burst your bubble this morning, but you know, God is God of the universe. God is not God of the earth, the United States of America, the state of Texas, the city of Fort Worth, Celebration Community Church. God is the God of the universe. The vastness of God is, you know, we don't even get. Our little minds can't comprehend. But that's, I think, part of the meanness today is people have this view that God was given to the United States of America. We are the only ones that have it, and we got to keep it, you know, keep it sacred, right, Diane?
That's why I always believe that there's all these different religions, like Buddhism, all these have a certain way of believing, but we all believe in one God. So why be mean to a Buddhist, or why be mean to this person when they all believe in the one God?
Right.
So that one God is the one that we all worship.
Right. And that's true. And like Jews, Christians, and Muslims are all descendants of Abraham. They all believe that, you know, Father Abraham, that God gave this call to Abraham to create many nations and all that stuff. And so they believe, just like Diane said, it's not a different God. It's not the Muslim God or the Jewish God or the Christian God. It's God, right? And so I remember an infamous Baptist preacher many years ago who was quite conservative, and he preached a sermon about this God hear the prayers of a Jew. What? God was hearing prayers of a Jew before you even came on the scene, you know? And it's like, really? And I thought, wow, that sounds so, what's the word I want to say? Like I said, like we've got.
Close-minded.
Somebody says it. Anyway, all right, somebody else, an example that you have of a conflict or, yes.
We've had a split in a church in this area, and it was very difficult because I could see it coming, and the people in the congregation were just oblivious to it. But you could see one faction sitting on one side, one on the other. And I went to the pastor and I said, you know, I really think you need to weed your garden. In other words, she was putting people in charge of things in hopes that they all would work
Right.
together, but they weren't.
Right.
And so it was really difficult because eventually the church split. And what you have is if you've been there very long or been very involved in that church, you have many, many friends. Some are on this side and
Right.
some are on that side.
That's right.
And you don't have to want to choose sides. They're going to choose them for you, and you are left in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult.
Very difficult, that's true, that's true. I know of a church that had a disagreement, and it got so divisive that a group on one side decided that the problem was the pastor, and if the pastor would leave, then everything would be okay.
Right.
And that's often how people, they focus on that. And so they, in secret, went and offered the this is quite a number of years ago, offered the pastor $50,000 if he would leave the church. And his comment was, you've got to give a lot more than that if you want me to. And, but it's like, really? And so what happened, which I thought was brilliant, the chair of the deacons, of course, the pastor told her, and so she just went to the deacons and said, this is what, and the deacon was like our board, you know, they were the deacon board. And she said, this is what's happened. And somebody's offered our pastor $50,000 to leave. Oh, they were so furious because, see, they thought it was going to be under the table, and they would offer him this money, and he would quietly leave and go away. And she brought it out into the light of day. And so if you're doing something and you don't think it can be told or said or in the light of day, that's a good clue to you that maybe that's not a good idea, right? And that kind of nipped it in the bud. You know, that was kind of like, ooh, this is not a good thing. So the things people do in church conflicts, just like Joyce was saying, and the things people do in families, and I can't tell you how many families, and I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, well, I'm estranged from my mother. I'm estranged from my father. Or I'm estranged from my brother. We don't speak. I haven't seen my brother in 10 years. And it's like, you know, man, life is so short. And it's sad. That's really sad. And so, but that happens all the time. And you probably know it's probably happened in a family, in your family in some way or another. And, okay, somebody else, some kind of judging or conflict or whatever that comes to your mind.
My younger sister and I, she is very, very conservative Republican. And so after the election of 2016, I was just, you know, I kind of like blamed her, focused on her. And I just felt like, you know, we couldn't talk anymore. But I didn't do it, I just felt that way, and she lives in Denver, so we don't talk that often anyway, but I finally got to the point with reading some articles and we made a decision that we were not going to discuss politics. Because when we would, she would say her thing, I would say my thing, it was like, I can't believe you think that way.
Yeah.
So she and her husband, and my husband were both on the same page. But the thing is, we ski once a year in Denver. I mean, not in Denver, in Colorado. And so I just thought, I said, let's just not talk politics. And so we've kept it up. She's a very close sister to me. So the thing is, okay, we don't talk politics. But I really am curious about how they're thinking. And so where I want to get to, and I tried to do it a little bit last year, but we're going skiing again next year. So I want to do that, let's air what our thoughts are.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is what you're suggesting
Yeah,
to do next year. And then if it gets hot, we'll,
cut it off.
we'll back off again.
And sometimes, if you set some rules,
Uh-huh.
like, okay, you've got 10 minutes and then I've got 10 minutes. But the other thing is, and I really have to work at this as a parent of two, I keep saying young adults, I don't know how old they have to get before they're not young adults, but
They're always younger than you.
they're always younger than me. And so, but two young adults, and it was the same when they got to be like high schoolers and stuff, and that is, the temptation is to keep preaching my same sermon about whatever. It's like, well, you don't want to smoke because da 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 da. And now that they're in their 40s, it's like, I keep having to tell myself, they know what you think.
Yeah.
There is not a doubt in my mind that they don't know what I think. That it's not about the smoking, it's about their health. And that I love them and I don't want them to get COPD or whatever. But I just have to say to myself, if they're not going to change because you say the same thing again for the 50th time, right?
Yeah.
If you just tell them enough times, they'll get it, right?
They know the consequences already.
They do, absolutely know. And finally, our son smokes, and it pains me greatly.
Yeah.
But finally, he was sneaking around, and I said, you are 40-something years old. That is your decision. You know how I feel about it. It's your health. That's what I worry about. And he said, I like it. And I said, then it's your choice. You do what you can do whatever you want. Maybe they don't parent their children, but they probably think I didn't parent them right too, right? But anyway, it's a very big temptation that if I get what you're saying though, Mary, you want to kind of understand how she got to that place. And I think that's different from thinking, if I just keep telling her, she'll change. Because that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's just like the dark web and all that stuff about, what is it when they...
QAnon.
Yeah, QAnon. And it's like, how can an intelligent person think that that is true? That Hillary Clinton is running a human trafficking ring out of a pizza store? I mean, you laugh, right? It sounds funny. But there are people that believe that. They think that's true. And so it's hard to grasp some of it. But anyway, so that temptation is, just like in a church conflict, if I can just keep telling them how it really is, I don't know that they'll see it that way, because, John?
I was going to offer what could have been a source of conflict. And soon after we came to this property, a survey was done of the different denominations that we each had. And there were like, I want to say 37. And yet, here we are 30 years later. And we might have some sore spots or such, but we try to resolve them. And it's not true of other churches.
Right.
We're all under one roof.
You decided to live together even with your differences, that, we do. And what Celebration did that is, I think, really helpful is, if you look at our service, if you came as an outsider, you would see elements from a lot of different churches. I have a friend, I've told some of you that when he was a student at Bright, he had to visit some churches, he was in a worship class, and he had to visit and write something about church, and he said, I don't quite know how to categorize He said, because some things are kind of Catholic and some things are kind of, and I said, and that's by design.
Yeah.
I said, that's done on purpose. It's not that we don't know. Oh, they don't know they're doing that. We know, but it's done by design. And so that's a very good example. It could have been a deal breaker for a lot of people. And it hasn't been, and that's a positive. Well, good conversation, and if you think of some other things, I hope you guys will come back next Sunday, and maybe the others that came last Sunday will come back. And, but it's, I think, always good to talk about these things, and so you'll be hearing more about this in worship today. So let's say a prayer, and it's going to be time to head over that way. God, we thank you that you don't leave us alone, even when we argue and we are judgmental and we dig in our heels, that you stay by us and that you keep trying to help us live into the people that you've created us to be. And we pray that that will be so.